prisons. We're going to maybe just start by introducing ourselves briefly. I'm not going to do the whole bio thing because we're going to get to talking about our work. So again, my name's Adam Clay. I've been teaching mostly in Angola prison, Louisiana State Penitentiary, for the past year, thanks to Allison Pellegrin, who sort of popped up next to me at AWP and said, will you go to Angola with me? And I said yes. So that's kind of been my experience. So I'm maybe the newest person on the panel to do this work. So kick it to Allison.
My name's Allison Pellegrin. I'm a former Louisiana Poet Laureate. And it is true, that's my pickup line that I used on Adam.
Oh, yeah.
But my instinct told me, we came from the same MFA program years apart, and my instinct told me that I was reaching out to the right person with the right type of soul to do this sort of work, and I was absolutely right. So I was, after that awkward interlude, we just kind of hit the ground running, and have been working not only to reach the writers at Angola, but at prisons across the state.
My name is Chris Ketchum. I'm a PhD student in creative writing and poetry at Georgia State University in Atlanta. And I am one of the prose editors of this magazine, Beyond Bars, which is for justice-impacted writers. And we work in person at Phillips State Prison in Beaufort, Georgia, which is about 40 miles northeast of Atlanta, with a small team of incarcerated editors. Two of our editors are incarcerated at Phillips State Prison in Beaufort right now, and then we have one other editor who was at Phillips State and then was transferred to another prison in a different city in Georgia. So we now correspond with him via snail mail for reasons that we can get into.
I'm Michael Kleber-Diggs, and I am in my 10th year teaching creative writing through the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop.
My name is Alex Trutbar. I kind of got into this because I was incarcerated in the state of Oregon from 2017 to 2022. While I was inside, I was a GED tutor. I also was a teaching assistant for Writing 65, Writing 121, kind of comp classes. And met some folks from Oregon State University, some volunteer instructors who became my mentors and helped me found a creative writing program at Deer Ridge Correctional Institution. It's a minimum security prison in Oregon. And since I've gotten out, I've been working with Missouri Humanities Council to found a creative writing program at Chillicothe Correctional Center. It's a women's prison in Missouri. I have some fellow co-instructors here in the crowd, I believe, with me. Mary Sauer, Brooke Spalding, and Carter Droves. I just wanted to give a shout out to them because we couldn't do it without them, especially when it comes to fiction and nonfiction.
And also, Kathy McGregor was supposed to be here today, but she had to cancel. She has some health issues, but she's been working with the Prison Story Project, which is in Arkansas, teaching on death row. She did send these down if anyone's interested in donating to her organization for a copy. It's a prison story program guide with some prompts and things that you might be interested in. So, we kind of geared this panel, I think, in a lot of ways. And for me, I've always wanted to be involved in teaching in prisons, but didn't really know how to get started. And luckily, Allison showed up and helped me get involved. And I think you all talked a little about your involvement, but I thought maybe we could kind of just start by talking about what does a day look like when you go into these facilities? What is it like getting in behind the gates? But then when you get in the room with the men and women that you're teaching, what does that look like? So maybe a couple of you want to jump in and take that through a little bit.
I feel pressure to go first because I'm right next to you. So I would say it looks differently every time. That's usually my experience. When we visit Angola, and they always know when we're coming, we always have a letter from the warden to get us in, but sometimes we sit at the gate and wait for an hour for an escort back. Last week we were there with some poets from the New Orleans Poetry Festival, and when we got to security, the scanner was broken. And they told us, Sean, are you in here? Okay, he would appreciate the story because he went with us last year when we had a different experience. But they told us the scanner was broken, so just to describe the contents of our pockets. And it's usually not that way. We're usually getting, my hair, people are going through my hair and the collar of my shirt. They make you stand in a closet with a drug dog and stuff. So,
and the scanner says, if you're pregnant, let us know. But
yeah,
it feels like from the 1960s.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And one of our people was pregnant, and she also had a broken wrist, and so I was freaked out about what that was going to do. And I didn't need to worry that one day. So, for me, the main lesson is that you don't know what you're going to expect.
Yeah. Unless you want to jump in?
I can jump in. You know, it's about an hour and a half drive from Kansas City to Chillicothe. We go once a month for 2 hours. And, you know, we all meet up, carpool around 8 a.m. It's a long day. It's exhausting. The way I kind of always think of it, and we were talking about this morning, is like it always seems like something could go wrong at any moment. Like if someone wears the wrong color shirt, or forgets their ID, or the warden calls them sick, or something like that, the class is just not going to happen. And so what I'm always thinking about is like when poetry is actually happening in these spaces, it always feels like an impossible thing is happening. It somehow feels kind of like sacred, even though it's like heavily surveilled. It seems like this is happening against all odds, like the state kind of holds most of the cards. So I'm always, you know, just like hoping that we actually make it through the gate. So yeah, it's precarious.
Yeah, and I would say, like, I mean, one of the advantages of teaching poetry in the prison is that, like, people don't really care that we're teaching poetry. It kind of feels a way of, like, kind of sneaking in. And these, you know, these people that are writing these poems that are, like, really powerful and questioning authority and systems of power. But I think the higher ups maybe think that it's just poetry. You know, what could it be doing? Obviously, we know what it can do.
Right.
But I feel like that's an important part of it too. Yeah. Michael, do you want to talk? I know your experience is very different.
Yeah, no, I would just say, so I've taught at every adult correctional facility in Minnesota in my time, and we have been working with the Department of Corrections in Minnesota for more than a decade to have prison writing classes, and our classes run for a semester, so I'm usually there every week at a particular time. And I would echo everything that has been shared. Over the years, I've encountered it all. I showed up for a class about an hour and 15 minutes away from my house. It was canceled because 2 guys got in a fight while playing cribbage. Not in the class, like at the facility. So, and every type of thing, but it's finicky, and also at the same time kind of oddly specific.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier. I'm always escorted from where you enter to where the classroom is, and in the years of doing that, I'll encounter all kinds of correctional officers, some who are resentful, and others who are very supportive, who see the work as important, and kind of everything in between. So, you know.
Yeah, I think the one thing that strikes me every time I go to Phillips State is just kind of like the banality of the experience and the kind of banality of oppression in many ways. And you know, it's some like kind of like Michael was saying, this particular prison is in a fairly red county in Georgia. Atlanta itself is located in a very sort of blue pocket in Georgia, which is why we have Democratic senators in the state of Georgia. But anytime we go to the facility, you know, you walk in through a metal detector, it takes a few minutes, and then you go in through the gate, and then there's a lobby, and sometimes we'll end up sitting in the lobby for an hour and a half of our 3 hours that we have at the prison, you know, before we're sort of allowed to enter the educational facility. But I've had other experiences where I show up, and, you know, I'll be alone sometimes to go teach a class, and I walk in through security, and then I sort of stand in front of the gate. Somebody lets me in, they don't ask any questions. I walk over to, you know, the counseling department, they call down, they let me into the education facility. So it's just totally, there's a kind of randomness associated with this sort of experience of teaching in prisons at all, or doing any kind of pro-social work in prisons. And I think that's part of the deal. That's kind of like the randomness and the chaos is part of the tyranny of incarceration. And so you get a little bit of a taste of what that means when you're an instructor in a prison. And ultimately what that ends up meaning is you show up and you wait for a long time, and then you're told to go home.
Yeah.
You show up, you wait for a long time, then you're finally let in for the last hour of your class. You show up, you walk right in, and you never know what you're going to get. And it all depends on, so, you know, it could depend on what's happening. It could depend on the mood of a correctional officer who doesn't want to make a call that needs to happen in order to let people up. It's just, there's
And an implied thing in our experience has been also don't complain.
Yeah.
don't just leave it alone. I had a training that I had to take before I could teach at a particular facility, and the trainer said, it's important that you show up at 6:45. And Allison and Adam and I know, like, you can get it wrong by being too early, and you definitely don't want to be late. So I showed up at 6:40, but the people who were expecting me wanted me there at 6:30, and I was literally about to say, oh, the trainer told me, and then I just thought,
Just apologize.
yeah,
really.
just because they work in spaces where talking back, asking questions, they're very, very used to systems of absolute control, and they're very used to coming down pretty harshly on people who have any kind of response to that. So, yeah, just sit and wait. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, last trip when we got like a smile from the guard at the gate, we were a little bit like, are we being punked here? Like, it felt like a strange thing.
Yeah.
And we had 4 hours with the men this past week, and I mean, 4 hours might sound like a lot of time, but it really, I mean, sometimes it ends up being an hour where we really get to work with the men. This time we had the full 4 hours and more, maybe a little bit more than that, I think. Which kind of kind of leads me to the next question, is thinking a little bit about like the curriculum that we all use, maybe talking through that a little bit. Allison, she, and I think this is really smart, she loves to bring in like a typed out sort of prompts, because we kind of assume,
I'm just anal.
No, it's okay. But I think, talking with all of you this morning, it became kind of clear to me that like, because there is so much control these people are facing on a daily basis, like when they get in the room with us, they want to just like talk and ask questions and just be heard. And so it feels a little bit like it's good to kind of send them out with prompts, but often to just have these conversations about like let's talk about grief for an hour, which we did. And I'll talk about this prompt briefly. We were developing a group of prompts around the You Are Here anthology, and we taught the Ashley Jones poem, which I think we did also in women's prison, and it's a really amazing poem. And we kind of had this prompt built for it. We read the poem. The men just want to talk about the poem, and it kind of got into this whole.
I even had my notes.
Yeah, you can notes about it. But the conversation sort of like led to just like thinking about like grief and what does grief look like in a prison. And I'll say this, we talked about this a little bit earlier, like we never bring in prompts that sort of are like, let's write about your incarceration.
No.
Let's write about, like what, and they're gonna write about it, obviously, but I think what I love about this anthology is it's like nature anthology. It's like thinking about nature, and what does that look like for men at Angola State Penitentiary, living there. So, when I say curriculum, I think it's always kind of a loose word a little bit in some cases, but I know others of you have like a different way of thinking about it. Do you want to talk about this a little bit, and then we can get
Well,
on that?
I can't mention this book without mentioning Megan Holt and One Book, One New Orleans, because through a Big Read grant with her organization is why we were able to bring this book to prisons this year. So I just wanted to go on the record for saying that. We're not always allowed to bring books, and one of the reasons I wanted to do the worksheets to begin with is because that's also a way to leave a poem with someone. And I'm a write things down person, so it means something to me to have a poem that I can write down, that I can copy. I've noticed that a lot of the men do that. They'll copy things over and over either by hand or with the Xerox machine. But yeah, the poems, I think poems are a great place to start. And if we can't bring books, I like being able to leave something, at least with a poem on it, because we have such profound conversations. But I want to hear what everyone else
Yeah, what are
says.
some prompts or curriculum that you've kind of found to be successful?
Yeah, with our program, so it's like a 16-month cohort, runs from last July to this coming October. We move through, it's a multi-genre class, so we move through, we've already done poetry, moved through fiction, are currently on nonfiction. We're going to do a month on publication, how to publish from prison. We have a professor at UMKC, he is a Beckett Scholar. He's going to do a one-off class next month, teaching Happy Days, Waiting for Godot, a bunch of Beckett poems, just whole Beckett thing, we were able to get a copy of Waiting for Godot, a DVD, into the prison so that the students were called down and were able to watch it in the counselor's office together. They did not let us show Happy Days. I guess having someone buried up to their waist in dirt on stage, a woman buried up to their waist that they weren't. The warden didn't like that. So. But, you never know. But they're going to let us teach the text though, not the film for some reason. So, but no, it's kind of what the hardest part about the curriculum is that we have to have our materials approved a month out. And when it comes to workshops, we do a workshop for each module too. Normally, like in an MFA workshop, you bring your pieces 1 week before class, you give them to your fellow students, and then they come back with their workshop letters. Here, because they don't have typewriters or printing or typing of any kind, they bring us the handwritten stuff. We take it home, type it, make copies, bring it back the next month, distribute them, and then they need another month to actually look at the pieces and write and do their feedback. So it's like many months, you're planning workshops many months out. That's kind of one of the biggest challenges, and so our curriculum is always kind of like, it's driven by that time constraint and that kind of temporal constraint.
I just want to drive off of that, like technology limitations, documents can be hard to bring in. There's concern, for example, that they might be tainted. I think LSD in particular is a thing that they're concerned about, or any kind of drug that might be on the paper. Books can be hard to bring in, especially if you're leaving them there, kind of for that same reason. We often try to run classes that include a workshop component, but there's some real complexity there. So it's, you get the documents, you bring them back, you make copies, or you scan them in and have the facility make the copies, and then they get distributed. So everything runs quite a bit farther behind. So if someone hands me poems that they'd like to include for workshop on the first Thursday of the month, we'll bring back copies of those on the second Thursday of the month, and we'll talk about them the third Thursday of the month, because there's that much time for transferring documents back and forth. We run, in a typical semester, we'll have around 10 classes going at the same time across multiple genres, but mostly in fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry, some songwriting things every once in a while, playwriting. Like if there's someone in town doing something kind of cool, we might ask them if they would teach a specialty class. We try to run the classes, we talked about that this morning, like we would just about anywhere else. Students who are taking classes with us don't receive any credit for that. At the end of the class, everyone gets a certificate that goes in their folder and of things that they've done while they are in prison. I suppose it can be helpful if they're looking at parole or sentence commutation, but I don't think it's the type of thing that's ever going to make a huge difference for someone. They're taking the classes because they want to, and most of us are teaching at the college level, and I think most of us teach the class like we would anywhere else minus technology. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think like the whole experience of teaching it really seems to vary based on which prison you're teaching at. So even there's no continuity between Georgia Department of Corrections facilities. If I were to go to the the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, there are very few. I'd be very limited in terms of what I could bring in there, but Phillips State Prison is a medium security prison, and so functionally what that means is you walk through a metal detector. Nowadays somebody takes your notebook and they go like this and make sure like an AR-15 doesn't fall out, and then you walk in and once I'm in there, it's kind of like I work on this journal Beyond Bars, and so most of the time I'm going to Phillips State is for editorial meetings where I'm working with a very small group of people. Now it's 2 editors and 2 incarcerated editors, and then the PhD student editors who also come to visit. But occasionally I'll teach one-off classes there as a volunteer, one-off poetry classes through an organization called Common Good, and they teach semester-long courses. So I'll kind of pop in. I've taught there maybe five times, so 3-hour-long courses, assuming you get in on time. And I've taught a half class on, I call it advanced haiku, because everybody sees haiku very early on in their poetry education, but I'm a big Basho and Buson and Issa fan, so I like bringing in some haiku. I've taught a class on the Black Arts Movement, I've taught a class on sonnets, I've taught a class on eco-poetics, and I think just like, going into the expectation that if you have a particular thematic interest in poetry and, you're really just, you're sort of making a pitch to your students like you would under any other circumstances. And so, I think like maybe what we're all kind of implying here is that when you go in to teach in a prison, you can ask yourself, how am I going to make this relevant to the people who are incarcerated here? Does that mean that the poetry I bring in has to be directly related to incarceration? That sort of thing. And I think, broadly the answer is no. It doesn't have to be related to incarceration. And the people who are there will bring that experience into their reading of the poems, if and when they want to, and they'll bring it into their writing if and when they want to. And you sort of want to create, at least in my experience, I think the ideal is to create classroom experiences where there's an opportunity to do that, and there's also an opportunity to just dig into the texts that you've brought in and think about other things, if that's what you choose to.
Yeah, which I think what made that Ashley Jones poem so powerful is it's about grief, and I mean, these men are all thinking about grief. I remember one man talking about how his mother had died while he was in prison and not being able to really mourn that, but then also the confines of was it leaving your feelings at the gate, I think was what he said, the words, that you kind of aren't allowed to have feelings, or, you are obviously, but you're not allowed to express them. And so I think that poem was so broad, and it is a nature poem, but it is about loss. I think there's a line let me leave whole again.
Please let me enter. Please let me leave whole.
Let me leave whole. Yeah. And yeah, it's kind of, I mentioned this when we were having coffee this morning, but I taught, poetry to young children before, and people are always like, well, what do you bring in there? You bring Dr. Seuss or Shel Silverstein? I'm like, no, I bring Frank Stanford. I bring the stuff that's it's real poetry, because the kids, they see things in it that I miss, and I think the men read these poems and see things in it that I don't see, and I leave a changed person every time I go in. And we'll talk about self-care in a little bit, because that's an important part of it, for sure. But I'm curious maybe hear you talk about maybe a specific example. That's one that I could think of for that prompt, but maybe an anecdote you could tell about an experience teaching in the prison that was really life-changing or a moving experience for you. That's a big question.
Well, I'll say, so I originally wrote to the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop to ask if I could be a mentor. We have a program where writers work with people over a sustained period of time by mail. So you'll get a packet of, in this case, poems from someone, and you'll share ideas with them, and you'll mail it back. And everything has to go from the person to their education coordinator, to the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop, to the mentor, and then back in that same way. And I applied to be a mentor because I thought they wouldn't choose me to be a teacher, because everyone in the program, it seemed like, had an MFA and I do not. I met with the founder, and she asked if I'd be interested in teaching a class, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not qualified. She's like, we can figure that part out. But I was excited about a chance to do that, and I think I was pretty far into teaching that first class before I was thinking about my own. So I'm a crime victim. My father was murdered when my twin brother and I were pretty young, and it just had never occurred to me to think that there might be a connection between those two things. And there's nothing super intentional about that. In other words, I'm not trying to fix the world with this work, but it did seem like that was connected, and that part of it was really important to think about that. But I've had so many kind of meaningful moments over the time teaching there. Some friendships that I've developed with people that I've been able to work with in multiple classes, profound admiration for the things that they're writing. For me personally, I think I also spent a lot of time with people who, as writers, were writing from their most difficult room. And I think in the course of teaching, I also found the ability to do that too, to go into my most difficult room and write, inspired by being in the company of people who do it all the time. And so that was really important to me and to my writing.
I can, I mean, the question was like what's the most life-changing thing that's happened when you visit a prison? It was actually, for me, earlier, just like last week, we were at the prison, Brooke and Carter and I were there, and we've been teaching nonfiction, and we had assigned, so we're teaching like, braided essays, lyric essays, memoir, also literary journalism, long form, kind of like hard-boiled journalism, and I had this long-form, deeply researched piece of journalism by an incarcerated writer in California, D. Razor Babb, and it was about this poisoned water system at this prison. And so we were kind of talking about like the perils of writing this kind of journalism from prison, and how unfortunately you need actual journalists on the outside to vouch for you, because a lot of newsrooms on the outside don't consider testimony from inside prisons to be, they can't verify it, so they're not going to publish it. So we're in class, we're talking about this, we're teaching this piece of journalism, and women in our class all kind of start talking at the same time about a murder that has just occurred at the prison earlier that month, supposedly the first murder at Chillicothe Correctional Center. And basically a woman who had been in prison for 10 years, was getting out in 2 days, had some sort of mental health crisis, so they put her in the hole in segregation, which is what they always do. And they specifically put her in the same cell as a woman who was also undergoing serious mental health issues, who was threatening to murder whoever was put into her cell. And so this woman proceeded to strangle the other woman for 17 minutes, and the guards didn't intervene. And since then, there's been no reporting on it. The prison admin has basically issued a gag order. Anyone in the prison who talks on the phone about it, writes letters, all their outgoing mail is being opened and surveilled, by the way, copied. They'll be put in the hole if they talk about this, even amongst themselves. And so we got this sense that they were, all of them talking at the same time. They had to get it off their chests. And it was kind of this moment where it's like, okay, we're teaching you how to write long, investigative journalism, but it's kind of hard to actually encourage someone to do that when the perils are, you go to the hole, you can't talk to your kids anymore, you lose your good time, maybe you're up for parole. And so we've talked about this in the ensuing days about what we do about it, and we were kind of talking about this today, what happens when you're an activist on the outside, and whether you're into prison reform or abolition, how outspoken can you be, what kind of work can you do without jeopardizing your ability to go into these spaces, and without jeopardizing the programs and the people that are the students, the incarcerated students. So, but also I was just really impressed with their ability to kind of bring this to our attention, and the fact that they trusted us with it. We're still kind of reeling from it, trying to figure out what to do about it.
Yeah. That's a still, I feel like I'm processing. Yeah, you're still not. But on kind of a different note, I remember just one poetry class, this advanced haiku workshop that I was talking about, and I basically I brought in a sort of long, printout of these three master haiku poets. I mentioned Basho, Buson, and Issa, to kind of give the students a feel for what real haiku looks like. And the idea of the class was we'd read a bunch of these haiku, we'd talk about the way that they're constructed a little bit, and then we would play this poetry parlor game, Hakai no Ringa, which is the parlor game that haiku originated from. Is the sort of 3-2, 3-2 form. that also spawned the Renga as well. And I remember just one student in particular, we had kind of taken time to read and talk about these poems before we had started that collaborative writing exercise, and he just kind of lit up. He's like, "Oh, this one haiku is I love this one haiku," and I was like, "Oh yeah, D, like what haiku are you talking about?" And he was like, "In this world, we wander the roof of hell, gazing at flowers." And I was like, "Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. What do you like about that? What do you like about the haiku?" And he's like, "Well, that's what it's like." Yeah. Well, what more is there to say? And so I think the things that, if anything, that just taught me, like, you can be surprised by what touches people, even though that is one of my favorite haiku. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised by that.
The men of Angola also love the haiku. I want to share this piece of paper. Well, last week, you can do this one.
Yeah, sure.
I visited Dixon Correctional Facility, and I hadn't had a chance to go there since last August. And so the first thing when I came, they only put the call out 2 days before, and so I guess the group had just been wondering where I was. And so the first thing, and I hear this a lot, they always say, "You came back, you came back." And of course, like, I've been trying to come back for 8 months. Like, I didn't just pick up the phone and decide, But I mean, the visit isn't about that, but it makes you realize how much the folks depend on this contact and this content. And so we were getting all reacquainted, and I was talking about a story that one of the men told me there about not being able to go outside for a period of 2 years because he refused to cut his dreads. And that just floored me, because I couldn't imagine not being able to go outside in this place where you're already confined. And then another of the men in the front, an older gentleman named Charlie, raised his hand, which I don't know why they feel the need to do that, but anyway, he raised his hand and he said, "Miss Allison, I'm so sorry to tell you that we just lost Sean Bale. He died a few weeks ago, and this was a leader in the community. I mean, he was just a great mentor to many of the people there, and that was just a shock to me, and I think they could tell, because I'm used to being not prepared for what's going to happen, but that was one thing I wasn't prepared for. And then what I'm holding in my hands is a piece of paper torn from a tablet that says, "Mr. Sean Bailey, sitting under a tree story." And this is what Charlie wrote down to me, so I would always remember his name, which I obviously will. So that's something that's sticking with me recently, and I know you're going to talk about this one.
Yeah, this is, I won't read the whole poem because, I don't know. It's a lot, but yeah, we sort of, I think, again, last week we sort of went in with a couple of prompts. We had guest poets, and then, the group just kind of started talking, and one of them in there, who's been in Angola for probably 15 years, maybe, something like that, was arrested at 16, and then I think went to Angola at 18, back when they, essentially, like, to protect, 18-year-olds, they put them in solitary confinement initially. That's changed now, as I understand it. But so kind of got this conversation with him a little bit, and he shared this poem. This is not based on a prompt, but I just want to maybe read part of it. Part of what the men do there is they write an accountability letter, which is a letter to a victim or a victim's family. And he said, "Can I read this poem?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." They always want to share their work, which I love. So I'll just read maybe the first couple of stanzas of the poem. Dear Jackson, I'm sorry. Sorry isn't good enough. Sorry is a reconciliatory word. I never knew you. I never will. There is no restoration. There is no justice. No exchange of eyes can make us even. And I can't just swap a hole in your family for a hole in mine. You are more than merely absent. True equity would require I die screaming. And we'd have to make a twin for me so I could be properly mourned. I have siblings, but it's not the same. And I'll just stop there, partially because I don't know that I can get through it, but you know, he opened up about his victim does have a twin brother, and sort of the way that poem is thinking about absence and doubling. It's really, I don't know, like you just sort of read the poem and we just kind of sat for a minute.
Yeah, and you know, that was such an important moment, and I'm so glad you were there, like, so that more than one person from the outside was seeing this. But a remarkable thing about it to me was how the men in the group reached out to him, like you could just see it leaping from their bodies as they were trying to, because he kind of ends the poem saying, and here we are again with words that aren't good enough, or whatever. And so to see how the men in that room, I mean, I'll use the word minister, I think that's a fair word, how they ministered to him in that moment, because he needed somebody to say something to him. And so anyway, I knew we were witnessing something remarkable on that day.
Yeah, and it's something I know that Michael, you and me and Allison talked about back in November when you visited, but I think working with these individuals, like you realize they're, you know, like we're all basically one bad decision away from being in the same place as them. And I think that's something that's really, you know, like I think about every time I go in there. I mean, the system is obviously very unjust too. I mean, a certain type of people end up in Angola, obviously. It's built on plantation land, so it feels like you can feel the history of that there.
Your first job there is working in the fields in the white outfit, picking cotton. I mean,
Literally, yeah. But I think, yeah, once you kind of start digging into these, like a poem like that, I think we wrote it based on a prompt. It was kind of like write an accountability letter, which again is something that's done. It made it sound like these letters go into their files.
it goes to the family, and
If they choose to read it,
If
yeah.
they choose to
Yeah.
read it, they can. You know, but it's not about and he has no control, obviously, over what someone does with that accountability letter, or if they accept the apology.
Yeah,
And that's how the men were counseling him after.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Maybe this kind of leads us to the next question that I wanted to ask. I don't know, going into a prison is, I mean, so much happens in a day. The lead up to it is intense. The follow through, the ending of it is very intense. Angola and most prisons are they put them in remote places, so it's difficult to get to. So families can't get to them. Angola it's literally on the Mississippi River. Even from Baton Rouge, it's an hour, but it's an hour of dirt roads and really, it's hard to get there. So I'm curious to hear how you all sort of take care of yourselves doing this work. What does that look like? Maybe we'll start with because we
sure.
talked about this a little bit. What is that sort of the experience like for you going in, but then also leaving too?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's intense for everybody. Having been incarcerated, I started kind of feeling this sense of dread the night before, and so after the first few months, I've kind of developed this extra care routine where I've got melatonin and a little gummy, and make sure I get a good night's sleep the night before in bed, and up super early. And I guess one of the things that's most rattling about it, besides just being in that environment, is whenever I get back to my apartment, it's like a 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. day, and I get back to my apartment and I come into it, and everything just feels really absurd and grotesque. I have my computer with the internet and all my books, and just after being in the prison where you don't take your phone in, you don't have anything, you go in there and in Missouri, I meant to say this earlier, in Missouri prisons there's a statewide book ban right now. There's no printed matter going into Missouri prisons, so no books, no newspaper subscriptions, no magazines. The libraries are very, very limited. They won't let us donate books. And so it's, again, it's this kind of black box. And so to just come out of that and come home, I'm just kind of rattled by how much, this abundance of information and resources. And that always feels really disgusting to me. But I also wanted to note, I meant to say this earlier as well, we've been talking about this, and it is really intense, it's really rattling, and it's a lot, and it can be kind of traumatizing going in there, but we also have a lot of fun, whenever we're in there.
Yeah.
I just think about a poem I like to teach, and this is, I teach this in the public library system too, it's a Ron Padgett poem, Nothing in That Drawer. the title is Nothing in That Drawer, and then it's a sonnet technically, but every line is just nothing in that drawer, nothing in that drawer. So it cracks everybody up, but it's also kind of like a deadly serious poem. Like one reading of it, it's like a pretty serious poem. But that one has always been like a crowd pleaser, and people write invitations, and it's a good kind of exercise for thinking about voice and performance, because then you can have everyone read it, and it sounds different the way they read it, you know. But I just wanted to kind of like emphasize that like we have a lot of fun and there's a lot of joy in these classrooms too.
I just echo all of that. There's a lot of black men in prison. Walking into that space, seeing how many people around my age were caught up in the system, feeling lucky, feeling it undeservedly lucky, being acutely aware of how a lot of times what separates people who are incarcerated from people who are not is an accident of birth. I have a friend who runs a program called We Are All Criminals, and what she did is she interviewed people who've never been to prison and asked them, have you ever committed a crime? And some of the answers are like, whoa, how did you agree with that? Well, you know, lived in the right zip code, you get the right skin color, but what she's wanting to do through that is pretty straightforward, which is just kind of blur these distinctions between people who are incarcerated and people who are not. I don't know how I'm going to be feeling when I leave. Sometimes really grateful. Like we just had a kick-ass class. The class that I'm teaching right now on Thursday nights has 4 guys in it that I've had in class before at different facilities. As a guy who's getting out, we'll have one more class together on Thursday, and then he's gone. The person's getting out in September, and so there are things to celebrate, even as a lot of times those sentences are way longer than they needed to be, and then also devastating things that happen. You see humanity in spite of really awful conditions and inhumanity, like all the time. And so and where I'm teaching right now is about 2 hours away from my house. Also in Minnesota, and it's up in the northern part of the state, so closer to Lake Superior. I had to do a weather check before I leave my house because it might not run. I've also got a place to stay up there just in case, because it can be that fickle. But yeah, I leave often feeling a surge of adrenaline and the fatigue that can often arrive in the aftermath of that. I don't realize all the different ways that I'm thinking about all of that often until I'm back in my car driving home. So yeah, it's kind of a lot. And another complexity is I hope I get to do this
Again.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like the whole thing to go away, and I hope I can keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, there's this feeling that you want more out of every visit, you know, and it almost no matter no matter how well the visit goes, it's like you want to reach that student that you didn't quite reach, or you want to have a conversation with somebody you can have a conversation with. We want to get more done at the editorial meeting, whatever it might be, and I find it, from sort of the self-care standpoint, that question, often find it really hard to sleep before these class meetings. We have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's about an hour from where I live, so for me it's pretty early morning. Not for everybody, but yeah, so I almost inevitably feel terrible the afternoon after.
Yeah.
I'm not a napper, but I have to nap in the afternoon to salvage anything of the day. So I guess at this point I've learned almost not to expect too much of myself. And sort of the afternoon after spending the morning at Phillips. But
Yeah, Allison, can I still get one other comment? once a few years ago, I was walking down the sidewalk and looked up and saw one of my students, and I would pay money to see a video of that. I think in large part because I didn't expect it. I was just so deliriously happy, overwhelmed. Those guys, the system is so difficult, and they go through a lot. And to see someone out and about that's really awesome.
I'm sitting here in silence, and that's basically what I'm doing on the way back. So I don't mind that it's 2.5 hours for Angola, and it's always in the afternoon, so it's longer because I got to go through Baton Rouge traffic, and I'm just kind of sitting there in silence, revising what I could have done better, how I want to follow up, that type of stuff. But yeah, I don't have a lot to say when I leave. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's sort of, I feel like going in without a phone is really strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we're so used to being able to document things or remember things that way. So your brain is almost like, how do I do this? Like, we went into the chapel I saw the chapel for the first time, which was built by the men in Angola in 40 days, like literally 40 days.
I would love to see the pyramids.
Yeah. But I was just in this kind of space, and the man there was like, oh, they weld, all the chandeliers were welded, all the pews were made in-house. The mural has, one of the three on the cross. There's like a gargoyle type reaching into his throat, and it was painted by one of the men who was in the prison dying of cancer. So he was like lying on the scaffolding. I'm just like, how do I get a picture of this?
Yeah.
So a lot of it for me is like, when I'm driving back by myself, I'm trying to like take notes or kind of think through things. But you have to, you feel off your game a little bit in some ways. It's a strange thing.
And I'm thinking too of how I can, like that man, the chaplain there, he's been in Angola for I think 50 years.
Yeah.
He's had one of the longest sentences there. And we were talking about this chapel I visited in New Mexico that has sacred dirt. It's called Chimayo. And he was, everybody takes notes on what you say because they have to later look it up or try and find out about it. And of course, I was thinking this time they didn't check our pockets. I could bring him some of that sacred dirt. Because I just have it in a bowl sitting somewhere. Like I would give this as a gift.
Just put it in a little bag and bring it in next time.
Yeah, it's not white.
Maybe we could kind of shift to questions if people have. We talked about a lot of things we wanted to discuss today, but maybe we want to open up the floor if anyone has questions or things you'd like to know more about our work or anyone's experience teaching poetry in prisons. Yes.
You had mentioned, Michael, that the process you started before you even got in like the classrooms or like in the prisons, you were doing letter writing, and that's been kind of my only experience with this kind of thing. There's a project in Oklahoma and Arkansas that does like letter writing, and my experience, and maybe you guys can touch on this, was that I got the first letter back, and it was like a 6-week correspondence. I would write a letter with a poem and a poem every week, but I never, and I don't know if it was going through letters getting flagged or just not wanting to participate, but I only ever got the one kind of letter, and it was this weird almost connection with the person.
And then it stopped.
Yeah, and then never, I kept sending letters but never heard anything back from her or the institution.
It's for us in the time that we've been doing this, our mentorship program is the hardest to maintain. The mail has gotten systematized and digitized in correctional spaces, and so what we're doing in a way has to kind of exist outside of that. And by the way, monetized, I should add that, like you send a photo and a letter to someone who's in prison, that goes to some other state, and then so no physical objects come in. We were also talking about what that does to archiving, the ability to keep things that people send you. But the mail, sending things through the mail has become the most complicated. For us, it's also fickle you're typically working with a person in Minnesota who's called an education coordinator. And if you've got someone who's diligent and responsive and good with paperwork, you're golden. And if you don't, it can take quite a long time. If that person gets promoted or some other thing, you kind of have to start all over again. But we have found that that program administratively is our largest lift. You would think getting someone approved to come in 15 weeks in a row to teach a class would be kind of tricky, but it's actually running a thing through a mail that has 2 points of intervention that's kind of the hardest to maintain. Within that, we've had some of those relationships that are 7 years old. One of the artists that we work with, who's now back home and working on an MFA at the University of Minnesota, wrote a book about his childhood in South Minneapolis that was published by the University of Minnesota Press and a finalist for the Minnesota Book Award, which is pretty hard to do. So some of those relationships have lasted for a long time, but they're all completely reliant often on one person within a facility really making sure that it happens. And I don't know if I could share any kind of insight at all, it would be to try to find the people in education or in chaplain, like someone like that who might be able to champion the whole thing and make sure that it continues. But it's very tricky.
They love gifts too, and we always try to leave gifts. I mean, of course, to our classes, but I bring extra books. I leave them for the library. I leave them for the education department or the warden with the prompts in it so they can see what we're doing. And then I have an excuse to follow up for an email, because those waiting for people disappear or change roles all the time, and that can impact everything. I hate it.
Yeah. Other questions?
Just quickly, you mentioned Missouri has what I've heard of as the most stringent regulation, no books, no text of any kind. Are there other states you're aware of? I'm very familiar with the Arizona system, but are there other states in which there is absolutely no book permitted in the facility?
I know that they tried to do this in New York, and there was a similar book ban for some time, but it was found unconstitutional. And I mean, New York is a state that has been able to strike down a lot of these kind of really draconian carceral initiatives. I don't know about other states. I know in Missouri, there's a law center at Washington University in St. Louis that has filed suit, I believe. But it's going to take time. The state of Missouri is going to draw that out as long as possible. So, but I can't speak to other states.
Perhaps it's a lack of imagination on my part, but I'm trying to decipher what that law is supposed to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, on paper, what it's supposed to achieve is stopping drugs entering institutions. And, I'll say drugs do get into institutions via books. I can say that. But there are ways to work against that without just a blanket book ban. I know in Oregon they've made it so you can only get books directly from Amazon, which is unfortunate. You have to support Amazon in order to send books to your loved ones.
That's true in Minnesota.
Yeah, because you used to be able to go into a Barnes and Noble and you can put drugs in the books and you go to the counter and send it. So the idea of going through a third party like Amazon is that the buyers aren't actually physically touching the book. But Missouri is just kind of skipping that altogether and it's not like an intellectual, they don't claim that it's it's not about the content, it's about the books, the printed matter being a vessel for contraband.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Real quick, I just want to say Arkansas either just passed a similar thing or is trying to when it comes to book banning. But I was just curious if anyone, and I'm not sure how some of this at the beginning, has anyone been the first entry point to starting a program like this? And if so, do you have any like suggestions or advice about like how to even go about something like that if you're trying to get in somewhere that doesn't have something?
I think this is my question. And I'll preface it by saying I never have any idea what I'm doing. I mean, I really don't. So I used to be Louisiana Poet Laureate, and when I was in that role, I was invited as a guest to visit the Angola poetry group. And I was like, sure, that sounds great to me. And so that was put together by the librarian and another woman that I've had the pleasure of meeting named Marianne Fisher G. Orlando. She's a retired criminal justice professor. And she has done work with Angola for the Angolite, which is their news magazine, for decades. So she knows, like I'm kind of naive too, which is either a help or a hindrance, depending. And so when I got in that room, it struck me immediately that I was coming back and that I was in a place that I was supposed to be. And so I just kind of was making a pain of myself, saying, okay, well, when can I come back? When can I come back? When can I come back? And I really devoted myself, because I didn't know what I was doing, as I said. So I asked the people at the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities and anyone else I met on the street who even said the word prison. I would be like, oh, and I just had phone calls. I was making phone calls, writing to people, et cetera, et cetera. The people at the state library helped me as well and put me into contact. And so anytime I had a contact and I ended up meeting these people, I would go visit prisons. I went to the Frederick Douglass Project and was able, that was one way I connected with the warden, was in the chapel at Elaine Hunt Prison, because one of the men pulled him over and said, oh, she's trying to do this, So I just tried to meet as many people as I could and just say, I was interested in doing a poetry workshop. And I always say things like putting them in control. So if you think this fits in your programming, which I truly don't care if it fits or not, but like those kind of submissive type of statements, I'd say that as well. And I say I would love for you to join us. And sometimes they have, and I don't really love it, but we talked at coffee this morning, we talked about the art of sucking up a little bit. And someone mentioned, I don't know who mentioned chaplains, but chaplains can be a real help. I don't like restricting activities, limiting that to a certain faith practice. I don't like that. But I have met some genuinely good chaplains who are interested in just helping the people that they serve, which is everyone. So I would just try everything. And if you just get one invite and you can just kind of lean on that and follow up, that's what I would do.
Yeah, all it takes is one connection, really.
And I also found that people who do this work are very generous. And I am so committed to paying it forward. So like anybody could cold call me with a question, and I would devote so much time to helping in any way that I could, because I'm indebted to the people who helped me. And I mean, I'm still learning. Like, I don't want to give the impression that I'm an expert. I'm just going with the wind, because it's so much of it is in flux all of the time.
Yeah, we're in the process of forming an organization so we can fundraise and have that happen. But again, just jumping through hoops.
What state are you in?
I recently moved to Oregon.
I can also speak to this specifically in Oregon. And we were talking about this morning too, that like one of the kind of things to wrap your head around with this stuff is like every institution is different, even within a given state. Like even within the Oregon Department of Corrections, you have different wardens in each prison, you have different kind of inmate populations, demographics, and what I found is like in minimum security institutions, because everyone in those prisons are getting out relatively soon, 5 or fewer years, there's just less institutional memory. And so like that's the creative writing program that I founded there. It's shuttered, I think, because it's a revolving door. I mean, it's great that everyone's getting out soon, but at a medium or a maximum security prison, you have people doing 10, 20, 30 years life, and that creates this kind of foundation of people that remember, that are holding memories of the prison. And so that kind of gives a foundation on which long-lasting, sustainable programs can be built. But what I found as someone on the inside is that I found like a staff member who I could get rapport with, and you make it their idea, and you make it something that it's a feather that they can put in their cap. So the recreation director became like his, like prestige, like achievement, even though all he did was just like reserve a room for us. So that's what we need. So it's like, yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. And so it's this sucking up thing. So just, and if you're on the outside, I would say Just try to find someone, and then once you have them, just like do everything in your power to like not piss them off, and not
Bring
have them.
king cakes, bring books, bring.
Yeah. Make it their idea.
Yeah, maybe time for one more. And I think there's not a panel after this, is there? Right? That sounds great.
I think that's right. Sean, we can go late.
Okay, well, so one more question, maybe? Right here, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
He was pointing at you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I work with incarcerated people as a sexual assault advocate, and something I'm curious for all of you is how do you, in a setting where, you know, folks often are not trustworthy, like, or trusting, how do you make people feel comfortable in those first couple classes to feel like it's a safe space to like explore art and kind of process things?
Talking about that this morning too. So a lot of times I've noticed that people have educational trauma. So school was not an affirming space. It was quite the opposite. School was a place where you felt belittled or less than. And now I'm coming in, just to use myself as an example, offering school-like stuff. And how do we unpack that? Two very quick comments from me so we can hear from others as well. The first is in a new class with people who are there for the first time. I have just found it takes time. The writing happens right away. How they feel about how I might respond to it, that takes time, and that develops over time. I often am teaching. I can't think of the last time I taught a class where I did not know at least 3 people who were in it, and typically more than that. And so they vouch for me. But the rest of it is, this is a good dude, or trust me, you're going to like this class, that kind of thing. No, it's not like that, that type of work. But before all that happened, my general experience was that it took time. The one exception to that for me was our women's facility. And I think things get going faster there because very often they have less time. Like, it's a rare woman in a Minnesota correctional facility who has a sentence that's more than 5 years. It's often, there's a very high rate of drug crimes, a lower rate of violent crimes, shorter sentences, some partner stuff, women who are in the car type of thing, like just like unbelievable. But things just tend to get underway a lot faster in those spaces, and that's not necessarily something I would say I'm doing. It's the women themselves. It's the women who kind of lead those programs. And it shocked me in Minnesota, there's one writer in particular who does have a very long sentence, and she's foundational in terms of encouraging people to take those classes and to write and to share what they're writing and to embrace it. So a good a leader in the classroom can also be really helpful.
I can talk about, you were saying, like, or Allison, you were saying, you came back, that kind of thing. Like, just returning. Like, because, I mean, unfortunately, there are a lot of grifters in this, like, carceral, like, nonprofit space, nonprofit ladder climbers who kind of dip their toes in. I had a friend who did a lot of time in the California system, and there, every few years, there'd be, maybe even a well-meaning group would come through. They'd do a workshop and they'd produce an anthology, and then they would vanish. And sometimes they vanish because of rules that the state has, where like you can't communicate with people in prison once you no longer have that official like educational kind of platform. And he said, "Fuck an anthology." He doesn't really give a fuck. But like a lot of people, they want to be published, but also they want like that human connection. And so yeah, I think it takes time. I mean, with Chill the Coffee, day one, we had an immediate rapport. But I think if you just keep coming back, that like speaks volumes. That will kind of achieve what you're looking for in terms of connection and trust.
I always ask, I come in with a plan of my stupid worksheets, which I'm famous for. But I always say, this is your time, and what would you like to do? And sometimes they come and they've written down questions they had from before, and so like, I'm just going through these questions. It just depends. So I try to be as open and to give them exactly what they're asking for in that time. I'm trying to look at you, I can't really see. But anyway, so just listening and not making it, you know, a power, like it's, I'm not like, oh, this is my classroom and this is how we do things. I mean, that's just not how I am. And I think it comes across pretty clearly.
Yeah, they always kind of want us to stand at the front of the room and then kind of like a classroom. We're like, no.
Yeah,
We're
the
sitting
first
in a
time-
circle with you all. Yeah.
The first time I went to Angola, they had a table like this and a chair for me behind it, and they were like out there. And so the first thing I did was pick up the chair and put it on the other side into the circle. And I think that was a lot. That helped. That group.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think exactly. One thing we were talking about earlier, I'm going to repeat myself, is often when you're working with people who are coming into a poetry workshop, you find yourself working with the most privileged class of inmates at a particular facility. People who are, from the general population who are led into the education building could be a small portion of the population there, and then the ones who are actually coming into your poetry workshop are going to be a smaller percentage of that. And so, I was guessing that I've probably worked with a total of 2 to 3% of the population at Phillips State Prison. And so ultimately, actually, I think one of the advantages of that is they all know each other already. And, they've all been vetted by the GDC and by one another to some extent, because once you reach a certain point, you actually might have some leverage as to deciding who gets to enter the classroom and who doesn't, as an inmate, not me. And so there's a little bit. I found that in the classes that I've taught, it's self-selecting, but it's heavily vetted. And it's partially vetted by the inmates themselves. I think, like, as far as your role or my role as a teacher, I think, again, I was saying this earlier, I think like the sort of highest calling that you have in a poetry workshop is to sort of cultivate, or any kind of education, it's kind of is about freedom and offering inmates there an opportunity to have a few hours where they can do what they want, and they have a lot more flexibility and leeway than they do during other times. And so that means that you might go in with a particular plan about how a lesson is going to go, and you have to pivot because they want to talk about something else and they don't want to do your writing exercise. And you can also speak very openly about that with them as well. I taught middle school before starting an MFA and a PhD, where you have to plan every minute of class time, and you have to be very careful how much leeway you give students. But that's not the case at all when you're working, with adults in general, and it's really not that different. And so if people want to get up and go to the bathroom and come and go and get coffee and go to the library for a minute, get a book and wander back in. If they want to talk during class, if they don't want to talk, this is all like, it's up to them and it's for them, and that's what is most important. And I think they start to feel that over time. That's what you care about, is that they're getting out of it what they want to get out of it, and that you don't have a particular agenda when you're going in there.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to chat afterwards, we'll be here. As I mentioned before, Kathy did send these copies down if anyone's interested in taking a look and purchasing one, donating to the cause. And thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, can someone take our picture?